Hello everyone and welcome back to the Santa Monica tournament of 1966, basically the second Piatigorsky Cup. We have a second clash of Bent Larsen and Robert James Fischer, and we all know how the first clash ended. Fischer, wielding the white pieces, lost playing his Ruy Lopez, and that's not something that happens very often. That is the game, if you guys remember, where I asked if the combination that ended the game is sort of a fluke by Fischer or a brilliancy by Larsen, and you guys had, different opinions, but regardless, Larsen decided to play a great game that day, and Fischer allowed him. So he defeated him, and now Fischer will have a chance with the black pieces to bounce back. Now, Fischer is doing incredibly well in the second half of the tournament. He's trying to catch up to Spassky, but Spassky built up an incredible lead, and even after winning 4 games in a row, Fischer is still trailing by a full point behind Spassky. So this is round 15, Bent versus Fischer. Let's check it out. And I don't know if I've discussed this in the previous game where I've covered Fischer versus Larsen. Fischer never really had a problem with Larsen. The first game they ever played in the 1858 Porto Roche Interzonal Tournament, Bobby won spectacularly with the white pieces. It was the Yugoslav attack against Larsen's Sicilian Dragon, and Fischer completely dismantled it in 31 moves. I don't know, I actually don't remember if I've covered that game. We could cover it after we finish the Piatigorsky Cup if I remember to do so. But yeah, definitely would be nice. They played a couple of other games. The second game they played in Zurich in the following year. That game ended in a draw. There was also that exhibition game in 1962 that Bobby won against Bent. And that's pretty much it. So four games going into this one. And then, Larsen won the first game, the first half of the tournament game in the Piatigorsky Cup here. And interestingly, it is the only game ever that Bent won against Fischer. So the one here in the first half of the second Piatigorsky Cup, and later on they will also go on to play in the candidates match, you all know how that ended up with. If it ended up if you don't check out my Bobby Fischer saga and enjoy some incredible chess. But yeah, let's get back to this one. Also a very nice game. Bent with white opens with pawn to d4, and Bobby will go for his usual setup as he did in the previous game against Jan Haindona. Knight to f6, pawn to c4. We have g6, knight to c3, and bishop to g7, pawn to e4, and pawn to d6. If you're struggling to play against the pawn to d4, studying Fischer's games is not a bad way to go. You will find not only interesting setups to play that maybe are not played today as much as they are countered by modern engine theory, but at your level, and even grandmasters still play them. Studying Fischer's games is definitely not a bad way to go about your chess skills. And here bishop to e2, which is and on bishop to e2, you don't go immediately for this knight to d7, e5 setup. Even though it can be played, it is much more popular to continue with castles. And now if knight f3, okay, pawn to e5, but after bishop to g5, pawn to c5. Fischer transposes into the Averbakh variation of the Benoni defense, and now after pawn to d5 and e6, we have the main line of the Benoni. So knight to f3 and pawn to h6. You could also capture on d5 right away, but h6, g5 is also very much playable. Bishop to h4, e captures on d5, we have c captures, and pawn to g5. Bishop to g3, and we get this position that Fischer already had in this tournament against Najdorf. Only in that game, Fischer played pawn to b5. And it's not that it's a bad move or anything. It's even the third top move recommended by the engine, but here Fischer goes for knight to h5. It is the top move recommended by the engine, and it is the one everyone plays today. For example, Max Warmerdam played it in 2021 against Hans Niemann. Their game ended in a draw. Interestingly, Ding Liren played it against Wang Yu, and Ding lost the game with this knight h5 move. Also, Alireza Firuzja played it against Wang Hao, also lost the game. So it's even played today, but I guess it just didn't fit their style. But it does fit Fischer's style. So knight h5, we have knight to d2, and knight captures on g3, h captures, and now knight to d7, going for knight to e5. Whereas white will go after the d6 pawn, as white usually does against the Benoni. So knight to c4 puts pressure on Fischer's d6 pawn, queen to e7, Fischer defends, and now knight back to e3. We have knight to f6, Here there are a couple of more games that reached this position, but only after this game has been played. For example, 2 years after this game, Jan Hindona will play pawn to f3 against Svetozar Gligoric, but he will lose that game. Here, but it is considered the best move, even by today's standards. It's the top move recommended by the engine. But Fischer goes queen to c2, which is also the engine's second/third favorite. And it is not as of move, or rather Bent goes for queen to c2, and it is not as of move 16 that we have a completely new game. And now Fischer could go for the immediate b5, but probably due to his game against Najdorf, he decides against it and plays rook to e8 first. We have bishop to b5. Larsen says, all right, that rook is not staying there. You can't put all this pressure on my e4 pawn. Okay, Fischer moves it. Larsen goes back, bishop to e2, and Fischer goes back, rook to e8. So it's hard to say what Fischer was trying to do here. I'm pretty sure that he wasn't planning on repeating after bishop to b5 rook to d8 being played one more time, as I don't think he was interested in a draw. But Larsen already defeated Fischer with the black pieces in this tournament. Surely is not looking for a draw either. He plays pawn to f3, and this is by far the best setup you can have against this line of the Benoni. Fischer goes knight to h7 and pawn to g4. Of course, he does not want to allow Fischer to execute pawn to f5, and he will have created, an outpost for the knight to be placed on f5 at some point. So knight to f8, we have pawn to a4, stopping pawn to b5, and now knight to g6 by Fischer. By playing all of these e4 and g4 moves, he also created an outpost on f4 for Fischer's knight, or maybe, somehow the knight comes to d4, although very much doubtful. King to f1, if the knight lands on f4, the g2 pawn will not be an issue. And here, while Fischer could play knight to f4 right away, it's not really that great. The bishop will once again move, not allowing knight captures bishop. Then after the rook moves g3, you will kick away the knight and then put a king on g2, and white's position will be excellent. So after king to f1, rook to b8 was played by Fischer. Now the idea is, of course, a6 and b5, and bishop back to b5, attacking Fischer's rook, rook to d8, and now you could consider a slower move, like let's say bishop back to e2, and then check if Fischer will go back rook to e8, or you could play pawn to g3, stop that knight to f4 from happening altogether. But after rook to d8, Bent played knight to f5. He wanted to beat Fischer one more time, and knight to f5 will do just that, unless Fischer finds the only refutation to knight to f5. And Fischer found it. Bishop captures on f5. I mean, when you think about it, what's a better piece here, the knight on f5 or the bishop on c8? Obviously the bishop on c8 isn't doing anything this game, and the knight on f5 is a monster, so of course Fischer will capture it. But why is Bent doing this? What's the idea? The idea is that after bishop captures and pawn captures, the knight has to move, and after the knight moves, he plays knight to e4. And the trick is now he wants to play f6, and once bishop captures, break through with rook captures on h6. So that is the plan, and there is only one way for Fischer to avoid that. And what is the idea? Do you see it? While I give you a couple of seconds. The move Fischer played is pawn to a6. It is the only move that counters Bent's idea, and the reason for that is that, well, you could play pawn to f6. It also prevents pawn to f6 by white, but that pretty much means you're playing without this bishop for the rest of the game. You cannot activate it regardless of what you try. So after knight to e4, pawn to a6 was played, which means that you have to react to this. You're not in time with pawn to f6. The pawn will just be captured and your bishop on b5 is still hanging. So now the bishop moves, bishop to e2, and only now knight to d7, guarding the f6 square. You could not play this while the bishop was on b5 because bishop just captures knight and then f6 again breaks through. So rook to e1, nicely aligning the rook with the queen, but Fischer now has all the time in the world. Knight to f6, and the idea is, well, if you play bishop d3, Fischer would just trade. Knight captures, and it doesn't matter what you capture with. Let's say you play f captures on e4, the queen goes to e5, puts pressure on b2, b5 is coming, and that's pretty much it. Fischer has a winning position. Capturing with the rook also doesn't do all that much, so not the way to go for Bent. Bent goes knight to c3, now threatens some nasty discoveries here, but Fischer just moves the queen, pawn to a5, and now rook to e8. We have king to f2, and Fischer goes queen to c7, puts pressure on that a5 pawn, and there's no good way to defend this a5 pawn. There's just no way to defend it. You could play rook to a1, but you just played rook to e1. So playing rook to a1, that would taste really, really bad. However, that is exactly what Ben played. He played rook to e1 and then brought the rook back to a1 to defend his pawn, because now he says, all right, I'm not going to win this game, but at least, I'm not going to give Bobby any material. I'm happy with a draw with white, but this is a long way from a draw. And while b5 is by far the best move you can play here, I really think that playing it against the Najdorf in that game sort of dissuaded Fischer from playing it in this game, whatsoever. So he played pawn to c4, opens up path towards the white king, and also here he just completely dominates the queen side. King to g3, and now while Fischer again could play b5, I don't know if the Najdorf game has anything to do with it, but he decided against it. He decided to go for the king side attack, and he goes rook to e3. Okay, queen d2 attacks the rook. Fischer doubles up on the e-file, and now rook h to e1 and pawn to h5 by Fischer. The threat now, of course, being knight captures on g3 as the f-pawn is pinned, and there's no good way to challenge this. He goes bishop to f1, but now Fischer just plays knight captures on g4. Rook captures on e3. We have rook captures on e3. Again, the f-pawn is pinned. King to h3, and now queen to e7. Bobby just mounts the attack. There's no way to counter it. g3 is played. Now, okay, the knight now really is hanging, but now comes bishop captures on c3 with an attack on the queen, so you have to react to that. B captures on c3, and rook captures on f3. We have rook to e1 attacking Fischer's queen, and Fischer just brings the rook back. Rook to e3, and again, there's nothing you can do here. You could trade, which is what happened in the game, or you could move the rook. We're going to show what happens if you move the rook, just queen e5, you threaten mate here, and once mate is stopped, let's say queen g2, you will play h4. And that's it. You will have to give up the pawn on g3. You could try this, captures, let's say queen captures, and now king h5, h3 threatens checkmate, so you have to stop it, maybe rook to d4, and then h2, h1, and that's it. That's, that's game. So after rook e3, rook captures on e3 was played, queen captures, and now queen captures on e3, knight captures on e3 by Fischer, and it was in this position on move 43 that Bent Larsen resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Yes, it's an endgame. Fischer is only up 2 pawns, but he will be up much more, and there is nothing you can do here. The bishop is hanging. If you trade bishop for knight, that's of course game over, because Fischer is up 2 pawns, and if you try to play it something like this, then Fischer can give a check, and if king h4, knight captures on f5 with check. If you capture, the knight captures on g3 with check, will pick up the bishop. If you don't capture, then you just lost even more material. Knight captures, and after bishop captures on c4, knight to e4 check, let's say king f4, knight captures on c3. Fischer would be up 4 pawns, which is, well, I mean, 1 pawn is enough for Fischer. 4 pawns would just be, no one should play. No one should play against Bobby Fischer when he's up 4 pawns. That would just be suicide. So yeah, after knight captures on e3, Bent resigns, and another victory for Bobby Fischer in round 15 of the second Piatigorsky Cup, but he still has to catch up to Boris Spassky, and we are getting closer and closer to that moment where the two of them face each other again in this tournament, because we all know Boris Spassky won the first encounter, and Fischer now needs a win against Spassky to take a lead in the tournament. And Bobby Fischer has never defeated Boris Spassky. For those of you who have been following the channel for quite some time now, know that the first time Bobby Fischer ever defeated Boris Spassky was in their World Chess Championship match. Going into the World Chess Championship match, Fischer has never defeated Spassky. So, of course, you know what will happen in their game, but also you don't, because there's more than meets the eye if you just check out the result. But yeah, for those of you who are just joining us, these are the final standings of the tournament. Boris Spassky obviously won, half a point ahead of Bobby Fischer, which is absolutely incredible, since Fischer was, going into the second half of the tournament, Bobby was in last place. So Bobby racking up all of these victories and getting second place here is just inhuman performance. And yeah, we're gonna talk about that a little bit more, but after we check out a couple of more games. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nice lesson by Ben. But like I said, the One game that Ben Larsen won against Bobby Fischer in the first half of the second Piatigorsky Cup is the only game he ever won against Fischer. And you know, that being said, I decided we're not going to go with the fluke. We're going to go with the brilliancy, as, you know, let's not have Ben's only win against Bobby to, you know, be referred to as a fluke, even though, you know, some people online are saying that. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank David Gasparian, Mike Manson, Ruhaho Hostetla, More Classical, and Christopher Medema for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And today is the birthday of the great Vasily Ivanchuk. He's playing in the European Individual Championship. I will check up a couple of games. If he plays a nice one, be sure I'm gonna cover it. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.